Welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition. This week it comes from Sammy James from Fulhamish, the podcast covering, would you guess it? Fulham. They are the visitors to St James's Park on Saturday. Sammy, welcome to the podcast. How are you keeping? Are you well?
I'm good, thank you. And I'm very glad that today everything really is black and white because you're playing Fulham.
Yes, indeed, indeed. How are you feeling about Saturday?
Um, Mixed emotions, to be perfectly honest. Obviously, we go into this with 3 defeats in a row, which is never nice and is quite rare for Marco Silva. It's not something that's happened all that often under his tenure. There's kind of like two rules under Marco Silva. We don't win 3 in a row, we don't lose 3 in a row. So the fact that we have suddenly lost three, I think is giving some Fulham fans the jitters, but then I think you have to put those defeats into context. Villa away, Bournemouth away, Arsenal at home. Hardly the three easiest fixtures that we'll face this season. So in all honesty, I think a trip to St James's Park is not what everyone wants, really. I think a nice winnable game here to get things back to kind of winning ways would have been ideal. But look, we won at Newcastle last season, so I don't think we're going into this absolutely despondent that we've got absolutely no chance. And obviously, you're only a point above us in the league as well, so that also gives us some hope that this isn't a lost cause.
You mentioned there that the form of late, and I want to focus on those two away games that you mentioned against Villa and Bournemouth. I mean, conceded 3 goals in each. So, what's the story there? Is it just a case that you're facing two very good sides in Bournemouth and Villa, or is there something more in terms of maybe a weakness at the back, so to speak?
Well, in both of those, obviously, the common theme was that we took the lead in both those games as well. Fulham seem to have a bit of an inability to hold on to leads. It's something that happened last season as well. I think it's a little bit of a mentality problem in terms of we're unsure what to do when going 1-0 up. Do we push and absolutely kill off a game and get a second, get a third, or do we try and sit in? And sort of Fulham tend to do neither, which just often ends up meaning that the opposition feel like the invitation to try and get back into the game. And also there's just been a little bit of bad luck, some great skill from other players. We do seem to concede a lot of long shots as well, which has been a bit of a problem. Villa scored 2. Obviously, Justin Kluivert scored an outrageous goal at Bournemouth. So, yeah, obviously I generally think this season defensively, Fulham have been pretty sound. We kept Arsenal at bay for long periods. It was only just a slight lapse in concentration from a corner. We won't be the last side to do that against Arsenal this season. So, on the whole, Fulham actually have made quite a good start. We've got 8 points from a very, very difficult opening set of fixtures. But obviously, we're only a few points above the relegation zone. So, you can hardly be like everything's come up rosy. And we might come on to it, but we have so many injuries at the moment, and it's really making life tough for Marco.
Yeah, I saw the number 10 this morning in an article about how many players could be missing from Fulham's side this weekend. And we'll get onto that in a moment. But it's interesting you mentioned, that you don't tend to lose this many games in a row. So is there a little bit of pressure on Mark Silva, not in terms of his job or anything, but just to stop this run of defeats?
Yeah, there is. I think any team losing this many games in the Premier League would feel that way. I guess this game isn't. I think some Fulham fans are pretty resigned to the fact that going to St James's Park, a really tough place to go, that we may be hitting a 4th consecutive loss. I think it would be great if Fulham could avoid that, manage to pick up a result, but no one's expecting this to be the one where we have to fix it. The one where the pressure will be ramped up if we do lose is the fact we face Wolves at home the following week. That then becomes a huge high pressure game because you have to beat Wolves at home in order to and suddenly if it becomes 5, 6 defeats on the spin, even someone like Marco Silva, the pressure builds up. Like, I don't think anyone's suggesting that Marco will get fired because he's got so much credit in the bank for the work he's done at Fulham, but not many football managers in the league can lose much more than 5 games in a row without their job potentially being on the line, or football clubs panicking because they think they're going to be in relegation trouble. So yes, there is an element of every game comes with a bit of pressure now. I guess the perfect thing from my point of view, well, the perfect thing would be a win, but even just getting a draw in this game would just it would just make everyone feel a little bit of ease. It would be another point on the board and you feel like, okay, now we can focus on a few more winnable fixtures in order before the November international break in order to kind of get everything back on track.
It's interesting when we talk about that kind of pressure on managers, because obviously Newcastle beat Benfica in the Champions League on Tuesday, and it was a superb performance, but their season has been very stop-start, especially in the Premier League. And as you mentioned, the two sides, Fulham and Newcastle, side by side in the league. And I think there was a little bit of course, there's a want and desire to see Newcastle kick on, but we don't want to keep saying after we've had one good performance that this could be the one that kickstarts the season, and then we get to the next game and it isn't. That it has to click at some point. So fingers crossed from Newcastle's point of view that happens on Saturday. You mentioned injuries there, then just talk us through who might be missing from the Fulham squad on Saturday.
Yeah, annoyingly, the press conference is in about 50 minutes from when we record, and I could have given you a more definitive answer on that one. But yeah, I mean, Anthony Robinson seems to be a long-term injury at left back. Ryan Sessegnon's been doing fantastically, deputising there, so it's not been as big a loss. But obviously, Anthony was one of the best fullbacks in the league last season, and that's a huge blow for us. We don't know if Joachim Andersen's going to be fit. He came off injured against Arsenal. Again, we've got Issa Diop, so it's not like hugely problematic. Kenny Tete's been out at right back. He was on the bench against Arsenal, so he could potentially be back in the contention. I think we are a miles worse side without Kenny Tete. He is a huge loss for us, and I'm just not Timothy Castagne's biggest fan. I think that if it is Anthony Gordon against Timothy Castagne, Anthony Gordon will beat him once or twice and make dangerous situations from it. He's always 6 out of 10, Timmy, but I always think he's beatable. And Kenny, one-on-one defending is brilliant. Sasha Lukic, our defensive midfielder, is out, so there's a question as to who will play defensive midfield. Samuel Chukwueze scored at St James's Park for AC Milan, I believe, a couple of seasons ago. He's out injured, and then Rodrigo Muniz up front is also out injured. Raul Jimenez was injured. He came back for the Arsenal game, but Raul Jimenez, Premier League legend, great striker. Has he got 90 minutes in him at 35 years old? Not really, but we don't have any other strikers, so he will play 90 minutes. So, yeah, Marco has been dealt a really tough hand at the moment. It could be worse. We do have lots of depth, which is fortunate. But it's just really testing us. And that's something we haven't experienced under Marco Silva. I remember the first season in the Premier League, we almost had no injuries. It was almost just like we were immune to injuries. I guess fate and luck catches up with you after a while. I don't think Fulham are doing anything particularly wrong. I think it is just a little bit of bad luck that we are getting injuries. All I'll say is thank God we're not in Europe.
Yeah, it seems like quite the list for Marco Silva to deal with. Well, from those who are going to be available, who is the key man for Newcastle United to try and stop?
Oh, it's a tough one. I mean, I think the player of the season so far, certainly the standout one, has been Josh King. Obviously, he's 18 years old and it's just he's amazing. I haven't been this excited about a Fulham player in such a long time. He looks like he's been playing Premier League football for 7-8 years. He should have got that goal against Chelsea. It was robbed horribly from that VAR decision. He's been very, very unlucky not to kind of get his first goal and assist, but you'll see him on Saturday. He just is a dream in the centre of the park. His touch, he can find his way out of a post box. He's just a really, really talented kid that's going to go far, that is going to leave us for an incredible amount of money one day, as long as we don't mess up the transfer and contract strategy with him. And we've just had it in almost every game we've played. It's almost been like clockwork watching the opposition fans say, wow, that Josh King guy in the middle of the park was very good, because not many people know about him because it's his first season in the Premier League. So yeah, I'd say he's the one to watch, I would say, because whilst he hasn't maybe got the goals and assists that his performances have merited, just the fact that this is an 18-year-old in the centre of park of a Premier League midfield and just looking head and shoulders above everyone, it seems like most games, is quite something to behold. And obviously for all the England fans listening and watching to this, I think it's very exciting when we get someone of his pedigree coming into the Premier League, because I think he will be an England player, give it a couple of years.
Yeah, everyone seems very impressed with him. Every time I've tuned into 5 Live and Fulham have been playing, everyone's proper raving about him. So he sounds and looks like a good player, hopefully, though he has an absolute stinker on Saturday. Talk to me about Emile Smith-Rowe? Because when he signed for Fulham, it seemed like a good deal at the time. He's clearly a man with a huge ability and talent, but he's only played 150 minutes of football this season in the Premier League. And for someone with his talent and ability, I mean, what's gone on there? Is it a case that someone like King is in his position and just keep him out the side?
Yeah, it's almost exactly that. He's fit. He had moments last season where he wasn't fit and he was out of form. He struggled last year, in all honesty. He didn't have a pre-season. He just didn't look sharp. He kind of started the season okay, but just faded away and just drifted out of matches. And when you see a player that just lacks any confidence, even if they receive the ball, they just pass it backwards or sideways, make the easy pass, don't attempt anything because they're just scared they're going to lose the ball. That was Emile Smith-Rowe last season. In fairness, in glimpses this season, he's looked good, but he's only getting 15 minutes at the end of the games. It's Josh King, ultimately, is just keeping him out the side. Going deep into Fulham here, I would like Marco to try and find a way of getting Josh King and Emile Smith-Rowe in the side. I do think it's possible, but Marco sees them both as just pure number 10s, and therefore generally the way it's worked this season is that Josh King's played the first 60-70 and then Emile Smith-Rowe's come on the last 20 minutes to normally try and rescue something for us. So yeah, I think we were all very excited when we signed him. I think that he's not necessarily done anything wrong this season other than just have a wonder kid that's taken his place and has done nothing to lose it. So yeah, it's a bit weird to have one of our club record signings sat on the bench, but it just kind of is just a positional thing, I think.
We could have two youngsters battling it out then on Saturday. Lewis Miley got a start against Benfica on Tuesday, kind of because Tonali had an illness. So it's going to be interesting to see whether Miley holds on to his spot against Fulham, and he was absolutely superb against Benfica. So there'd be no complaints if he did start, and it would mean that Newcastle could rest Tonali perhaps for the cup game on Wednesday. But Newcastle's midfield well stocked, the likes of Bruno, Joe Linton, Jacob Ramsey. Do you think that midfield area is going to be key on Saturday?
Oh, absolutely. We need players that are going to be tough and physical and able to put up a bit of a fight, I think. And so without it's why Sasha Lukic's injury is particularly difficult, because I think it would have been perfect to have that double pivot of Sander and Sasha patrolling the midfield. I think they would have been up for the fight against your midfield, and therefore I think we would have had a chance of trying to dominate in that area. Without Sasha, it's obviously Sander on his own doing a lot of work. There's a big debate in the Fulham fan base right now as to who should go alongside Sander in midfield. He's chosen Tom Cairney to start in the last couple of matches. Tom Cairney's a legend. He's been at the club for years. And don't get me wrong, when he puts his foot on the ball, he's still got an outrageous touch. He's got a wonderful pass on him. But he isn't the most physical of midfielders. He's never been that. So I think a lot of Fulham fans would like to see Alex Iwobi drop into midfield. He's been on the left wing mostly, but I think, and lots of Fulham fans think, his best position would be as a driving number 8. He's one of those players that isn't afraid to get his foot on the ball, look for space, drive into it, dribble into it, make something happen. So I think also Alex is quite a big, tall, physical presence. It's obviously not what he's really known for, but he is tall, and I think he'll be able to deal with that battle, get his foot on the ball. And so I think with Sander, with Alex, and with Josh in midfield, you've got really great technical players as well who will be able to hopefully deal with that midfield battle. But look, I think everyone knows when you face Newcastle, there are several threats, but one of the big ones has always been, especially when that kind of magic three of Guimaraes, Tonali and Joe Linton play, you know that you're in for a really, really tough day at the end. Not only are they all just three great technical players, but they're also absolute beasts and will fly into tackles and will try and rev up the crowd. And so how you deal with that, I think, is always the way to get a result against Newcastle, particularly at St James's.
But that being said, Brighton exploited those three very successfully in the last game in the Premier League, and hopefully Newcastle have learned their lessons. It seemed to change in personnel against Benfica, but the issue that was there, the space between the defence and the midfield, looked to have been solved. And Newcastle have got options to rotate. So, I mean, if it was me, I would play the same midfield three against Fulham. But Eddie Howe may well look to rotate. So it makes the answer to the next question a little bit more difficult in terms of Fulham potentially hoping to take advantage of Newcastle United's busy schedule, because it's a quick turnaround for Newcastle United, games coming thick and fast in other competitions. And while he might rotate the midfield three, other players like Kieran Trippier and Dan Burn at left back and right back respectively, they're going to start. The centre backs are going to be the same players. It's going to be Nick Voldemort. It's likely to be Anthony Gordon on the left wing, probably Jacob Murphy. So you're not looking at too many changes on Saturday. So will that be something that Marco Silva's hoping and Newcastle United are feeling just that little bit tired?
You hope so. I feel like, though, with Fulham, whenever you get these fixtures, and they happen more and more frequently given how many clubs are in Europe, where you're like, okay, great. They've played in Europe in the week. We've had a week off. In theory, we should be fresher. And we had a lot of times last season where we seemed to play the Europa League sides who had played on a Thursday and we got them on a Sunday. In theory, that should mean it's massively advantaged Fulham. And it just felt like every time that happened last season, Fulham didn't take advantage of that. And we looked the more knackered. There were several occasions last year where we were like, how are we the ones blowing? They played on Thursday night and we've had like 8 days off. So I don't know, like in theory, yes, you look at that as the opposition and think, right, this is when you can take advantage of Newcastle. They played on Tuesday. They've not had the rest. We've had all of that time to prepare. But I think it just seems to never quite go that way for us. So, yeah, I've got excited by that before and then just always ended up being not that big a deal when it gets to it. So I hope so, but just doesn't feel like history suggests it does all that much.
Do you know what? You could be talking as a Newcastle United fan there, because that's exactly how we feel when you get that opportunity where you think, we will win this game. And then it's like, oh, there's the banana peel. We'll just slip on. In terms of Fulham's approach to this game, how are they going to come into the game in terms of what they're going to do with the ball? Are they going to sit back and try and frustrate Newcastle? Will they want control of the ball and try and maybe control elements of the game? Can you just provide some insight into that?
Yeah, well, I think Marco is definitely someone that adapts his tactical approach based on the opposition. He is not dogmatic and only plays one system. He will tweak and change slightly. I mean, look, we like to get our foot. We do like to get our foot at the ball and pass, but when needs must, we will adapt our system. And that's what I think might happen on Saturday. Without someone like Sasha Lukic there, as I mentioned, you wonder, he's been kind of flicking between going a back four and a back five. We did back five away at Villa and at Bournemouth, and then we went back to the back four at home against Arsenal. Given that one of Newcastle's strengths is counter-attack, and generally a good way to play Newcastle, especially at St James's Park, is to go there low block for straight. It feels to me like he might try the back five again. It also suits a little bit who's available, because we do have defenders that can play that system. You've got Jorge Cuenca, you've got Issa Diop, and you've got Calvin Bassey, who can kind of fit quite nicely as the three centre-backs. Then you've got Ryan Sessegnon and one of the right-backs, Castagna or Tete, who can kind of play the right-back, right wing-back position and bomb forward. So I'd like us to play back four, because I do think that's how Fulham play best. However, I just have a hunch that Marco will look at Newcastle, look at their strengths, look at their weaknesses. The five at the back just does prevent the counter-attack and does stifle it. But in lots of other ways, I feel like we are never as natural. We never look quite as comfortable playing the back five. I don't think the players know that system as well as they know the back four system with the two in midfield. But I have a feeling that ultimately the blueprint of success last season was by containing Newcastle in that first half, keeping it to a 1-goal deficit, and then being clinical in the second half when that St James's Park crowd got a little bit restless by the fact they weren't further in front. So it was a blueprint that worked last season, and I can see us doing it again. With that back five, against Bournemouth and against Villa, we did crumble and collapse in the end, but certainly in the first 45 minutes, we looked pretty tough to break down, and we were frustrating the opposition. It's just that we made individual errors and also conceded a couple of incredible long-range goals that eventually broke us down, and then we were forced to try and come out, and we never really looked that effective. So that's my prediction, that it's a back five, but I sort of would kind of like us to go for the back four and actually take the game to Newcastle, but that might be a foolish move and probably why Marco avoid it.
Be interesting to see how indeed they do set up. A lot of people from a Newcastle point of view slightly concerned with Dan Burn playing at left back. So who would it be going up against?
I assume Harry Wilson. Samuel Chukwueze was really pushing for Harry's spot on the right wing, but he's picked up a knock. I don't know if he's going to be back. Even if he is back, it feels like he would be off the bench. The other option is Adama Traore, obviously. In theory, Adama Traore should work. In practice, especially this season, he's looked really, really poor whenever he's played. It just looks like... It almost looks like the trick's gone. Like the old Adama Traore, I am just an absolute beast and rapid, just doesn't seem to be working anywhere near as effectively for him. He looks disinterested half the time, in all honesty. So, yes, you would look at Dan Burn, and if you were going to just pick on theory, you would say, well, this is clearly a game for Adama Traore. Put long balls over the top and he'll race in behind and beat Dan Burn with his pace. But just his form is so off that I imagine he'll go for Harry Wilson, which will probably be a little bit more of a kind of player that Dan Burn will be happy to face, because whilst he's not slow, he's not exactly known for being lightning quick either. Like he's a very good technical player, but that's the kind of thing I think Dan Burn deals well with. I mean, Dan Burn's such an interesting player because we obviously have that history of Dan Burn of releasing him in the Championship and not being good enough for Fulham, that were nearly bottom of the Championship, and then he's gone on to do everything he's done. He played for us at right back at Stoke away when we were relegated. It was one of the worst performances ever put in by someone in a Fulham shirt. His transformation and what he's gone on to do at Newcastle is genuinely unbelievable, and Fulham fans can't believe he's the same player that was here at Craven Cottage. So we know that Dan Burn's a great player, and in theory, you stick a fast player up against him and he should struggle. But it seems to me from the outside that he rarely does. And no matter who he goes up against, he always puts in a pretty good fight. And he seems to make, I don't know about you, what you think about it, but he seems to make up from his lack of pace through his intelligence.
Yeah, he does. And, the past couple of games, he's been beaten once or twice, but then he seems to adapt. And I think what we've seen, it's maybe kind of that shock factor. I don't want to say it wakes him up, because that's, it's not like he's sleeping or anything, but, it seems to get better after he's been beaten once or twice, and maybe relied on Nick Pope to pull off a great save. But yeah, I feel like it's a little bit insulting every time I do these podcasts today, because I'm like, what do you think of Dan Burn playing at left back? Is he going to be where you're going to target? I don't mean that insulting to Dan Burn, because for the large part, whether it's left back or centre back, he does absolutely brilliant. But I think if you're an opposition manager, you are probably targeting Newcastle's left side as the way through. In terms of Fulham's main weakness, what are we looking at? What do you think Eddie Howe is looking to exploit?
I guess, it's actually been our creativity this season. We don't look like scoring too many goals. It's all been a little bit predictable, some of our attacking play. But I think actually, as well as that, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but if it is Timothy Castagne playing at right back, I do think he's beatable. I do think he's got a mistake in him, and up against someone like Anthony Gordon, I'm a little bit nervous about that. Semenyo obviously scored a brilliant goal against us in the Bournemouth game, and that was Timothy Castagne's mistake. He let him run to the byline and got round him, and he slotted it home. It was a brilliant finish, don't take me away, but Timothy Castagne should have done better, and it does just feel like once or twice a game, Timothy Castagne just gets beaten far too easily. And Arsenal actually beat him a few times with Martinelli, I believe, on the left-hand side. And we got lucky, Bernd Leno bailed him out, but it could have been very, very different. So they're the two. We are looking like we haven't got much more than a goal or two in us, really, which is a shame, because generally we've been pretty strong going forward. But just the amount of injuries, not having Rodrigo Muniz in the side, relying on a 35-year-old up front, it does just mean that realistically we almost have to keep a clean sheet in order to have any hope of winning the games.
Well, let's test how well you know Fulham this season then, because I've got a stat about how poor they've been attacking-wise. So sorry to drop you in it, Sammy, but I'm going to test you out anyway.
Yeah.
So only Burnley and Sunderland have had fewer shots on target than Fulham in the Premier League this season. Do you know how many shots on target Fulham have had so far?
God. Well, I know
It's
it was
not very
zero.
exciting stat, But
I know it was 0 against Arsenal. So I'm going to guess that we probably normally, and against Brentford, we racked up quite a few. We were quite good against Brentford, but it was really the only game I can remember. I'm honestly going to be surprised if it's much into double figures, maybe like 15.
no, it is. It's so Sunderland and Burnley have had 21 shots on target,
Okay.
and Fulham have had 23.
Okay. Oh, a little bit high, but still, yeah. I mean, that's what, like 2.5 a game. That's,
You know
a
what? That's
little bit
perfect.
concerning.
Yeah, 2.6 average. This is so, but that is also your lowest. Let me just get the right stat up. Sorry, the average of 2.9 shots on target per game is the lowest ever in a Premier League campaign. So
Yeah.
I think that means does that mean ever on Fulham's campaign? Anyway, it's pretty low. So good news for Newcastle, who've kept clean sheets. Have only conceded 7 goals in the Premier League so far. So that will be something that they'll be looking at. We've mentioned a few Newcastle players, but is there anyone? I think you might pick Anthony Gordon potentially again. But is he the man more than anyone that you're fearing from a Fulham point of view?
No, I think it's Woltemade, right? I mean, he looks brilliant. Even I can't remember which goal it was against Benfica. I'm pretty sure it was in the second half because you were attacking the Gallagher, but he did a little back heel in the build up to it, and you were just there like, oh my god, like how good is this guy? Obviously, the goal against Brighton was insane. He just looks like that kind of striker who's in that phase where he's playing every match. He's like, I'll score today. I will score today. Or if I don't score, I'll do something incredible that creates a goal. So it's always horrible when you face those strikers in that kind of form where they've got that self-belief that everything they do turns to gold effectively. It might be a good reason for why I'm hopeful that someone like Calvin Bassey will be able to deal with his kind of physical big presence, but he's also very good with his feet, so it's not necessarily like I'll contain him physically and then he's out the game as well. So yeah, he's the one that because it's horrible facing those players when you're just like, oh god, he's gonna have that real energy and that belief and just confidence to try. I mean, that goal against Brighton, like you shouldn't be trying that really. Like that's not a sensible way to deal with it. But of course, in the form he's in, it went straight into the inside netting and the away ends in raptures. So yeah, he's the one that genuinely I'm just a bit like, oh please, can we just contain him on Saturday?
Yeah, good luck, because a few teams have managed to do so. I'm going to get your score prediction, but just first, ladies and gents, a reminder that this episode is sponsored by NordVPN. Click the link in the podcast description box to get your plan with our discount. Prices start from just £2.30, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. One subscription, 10 devices, perfect for keeping you safe online while browsing public Wi-Fi. Thank you to Nord for the support, and thank you to you guys for supporting the podcast and staying safe online as well. Come on then, Sammy, what's the score going to be on Saturday?
Well, I am a big player of Super 6, and Newcastle Fulham is one of the games this weekend, so I actually had to do my prediction this morning. I went for 1-1 because I hate to bet against Fulham, even though probably I should. I'll go for 1-1. There's just this theory that I just don't see us losing 4 in a row. I feel like Marco and the team will be extra motivated in order to kind of arrest that slide. But I think it would be a little bit ignoring the evidence to suggest that we're going to go to St. James's Park and win. So I'm hopeful for a scrappy 1-1 draw. I don't think we will help it become a very nice occasion for Newcastle supporters. I think we'll do our absolute best to frustrate and to contain and repeat the blueprint of last season, because it was our first win at St. James's in an awfully long time. We weren't amazing, particularly in the first half. We were absolutely on the ropes, but we were just clinical with the few chances that we got. So yeah, I'm going for 1-1, maybe against my better judgment.
I think if you get an early goal, then that will, I mean, obviously that works in your favour, but I think that will really get the crowd up a height because Newcastle's season's been so stop-start that after a brilliant game against Benfica, it's kind of like it has to be now. Surely this is where we kick on, and an early goal against Newcastle will get the nerves going, and we'll obviously be very upset if you do indeed score. But I'm even with that in mind, and I think there's a chance that could happen. I think Newcastle might come flying out the traps. I'm still going to go for a 2-1 win for Newcastle. At home, they seem to do all right. You know, if it was at Craven Cottage, I'd be a little bit more fearful because on the road, Newcastle are absolutely awful. But at home, Newcastle seem to be much better. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 victory. I don't think it's going to be first on match of the day, put it that way. But,
Yeah, I think we can both agree on that one.
Hopefully, though, from our point of view, it is 3 points for Newcastle United. Thanks to Sammy for providing the insight into Fulham. Thank you to you guys for watching and listening. Do head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news, including live coverage of this through our Matchday blog. And I'll be back on Monday. Well, actually, no, I won't. I will be off on Monday, but the Monday show will be back with Mark and Sean, hopefully celebrating all 3 points for Newcastle United against Fulham.